So we've been running this course for the last 3 weeks, session 3, and we're looking today at customer development. And I'm going to introduce myself. So I'm Chris Lane. I'm a head of department, subject area head at London Metropolitan University. And one of the subjects within my disciplinary area is community development. And that involves a lot of people who are interested in social entrepreneurship. So that's really where my expertise lies. Now, Sandra, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. So I'm the competition manager for the Creative Spark Big Idea Challenge, and I've been working on the competition with Chris for the past, for this year and last year. My background is in food science, and I've worked on building a startup before that made insect-based chips.
Fantastic. And Simon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Simon Boot. I am the head of Accelerator London, which is London Met University's business incubator. I've been working here since 2012, running programs to help our students and graduates turn interesting ideas into viable businesses.
Brilliant, Simon. Thanks very much. And it's really good to have you with us, by the way. So this is just a little overview of the course. So far, we've dealt with ideation and looking at problems. Of course, we introduced the course in the first session. And as I've been saying to anybody who's been joining us as we've gone through the kind of waiting room for this morning's session, the recordings of all the previous sessions are uploaded on our course website, which I think you should all have access to because you couldn't have got here without having that link. Today, we're looking at customer development, an absolutely key element that's really at the heart of everything we believe in when it comes to thinking about validating ideas for new startups. Next week, we're doing something which is really about helping people prepare for their entry into the Big Idea Challenge competition, and that's to help you create your pitch. And then we have a great Q&A session planned with entrepreneurs or people with experience of the startup sector, where you'll be able to ask your own questions of them at the end as the last part of the course. So last week we looked at problems and how they're really at the heart of a business, and we looked at different ways of assessing problems, how to set them into the context of your own ambition. And Sandra talked quite a bit there about whether you had envisaged a kind of micro business, a small and medium-sized enterprise, or perhaps even a billion-dollar company. But it was really important to think of the problem in the context of the ambition that you have. She also talked about how you might estimate the size of the opportunity, and you could say then the size of the problem or the number of people that it might affect, and then to also think about your team's own expertise. So that was last week. And in today's session, we're going to talk a little bit about a nice exercise which is good for helping build teams, which we use quite a lot, and it's quite a famous exercise that you may well have come across yourselves previously, called the Marshmallow Challenge. And although it's not really possible to do that virtually, we've found a way of trying to emulate it as much as we can during this session. And then we're going to go on to look at your big idea right now, what is customer development, and how to do customer development. And then we hope that if I don't talk for too long in this opening section, that there'll be time for your questions. Sandra has uploaded 2 books, Talking to Humans and Testing with Humans, by Giff Constable. And they are, I think, absolutely excellent preparations for you as you start to think about working with understanding your customers. And these are freely available books in virtual form. So there are PDFs, and you can access them, as I've just said, through the course site. Now, I said we are going to look at this exercise called the Marshmallow Challenge. And the Marshmallow Challenge, I think it's right to say, was invented by Peter Skillman and then actually popularized by Tom Wuchek as part of a TED Talk, probably about 10 years ago. And we've used this quite a lot in our ideation workshops. But I was going to tell you a bit about it. The way it works is that, and you could try this at home, is that you need 20 pieces of spaghetti, which probably most people have in their larder. You need 1 meter of tape and 1 meter of string. And you also need 1 marshmallow. So this is how you set yourself up. And then the goal, which you can do yourself, but really this is about a team exercise, if you can possibly do it as a team, is to, in 18 minutes, build the highest possible tower using the spaghetti and tying it up with string and tape, and then putting the marshmallow on the top. So you have to put the marshmallow on the top, and the structure that you create can't be anchored in any way to a surface. So it has to be freestanding and movable. So that's the goal. And I was going to do a quick poll for you. So I want to know which of these two groups of people do best when they're attempting this exercise. Now I just have to set up my poll. If you will just give me 1 second. So I'm going to start the poll, and you have to vote for either 1 or 2, and I'm going to let you see the responses. So who do you think would be best at undertaking this exercise? So please do vote. I'm going to wait until pretty much everybody's voted, so please do it as quickly as you can. You just have to click on the number that you can see on the poll. Okay, somebody's saying that the vote has stopped for them, which is a bit disappointing. I'm not sure, what can I do about that? Maybe it's because I've shown the results. So let's try again. Can people, and if I hide the responses this time, maybe, okay.
Oh yeah,
okay,
it's
working better now. Okay, sorry about that. Thanks for your feedback, by the way, everybody. That was very helpful to tell me it wasn't working.
Okay, we're getting lots of answers.
Okay, 31 people have voted, 40 people have voted. So I'll show the responses now. So most people think that business students would be best at this exercise, and nursery children would be less good. So that's really interesting. I mean, it's interesting that there's a variety of responses there. Okay, so we're going to move on now, and I'm going to say something a bit more about that later. Now, in my next poll, and I'm going to keep you polling here, I would like you to tell me, and let's see if this will work. Can you tell me whether you think the structure number 1 would be the best one and would be the winning team, or structure number 2? And I don't know if you can see, but there's a bit more tape on structure number 2. It's a bit of a stronger structure in the sense that it's got 2 strands of spaghetti in the left-hand one rather than 1. I guess it's also, it's actually slightly broader in its base than the one on the right-hand side. Okay, so let's see what the responses here are. So
number 1 is the winner.
Overwhelming result is that number 1 is likely to be the best result. Okay, well that's great. So now I'm going to just show you what happens next. So the first team have gone forward with increasing the size of their structure, whilst the second team have already put the marshmallow on the top. So I'm going to ask you again, let's see if we can run the poll again. And would you mind telling me now, do you still take the view that number 1 is best or number 2 is best? Tell us.
Seems to be changing a little bit now.
Okay, well, let's stop it there. So this time, a few more people, more people seem to think number 2 is better than number 1. Now, I must say, I'm a bit curious that you've chosen to say that, because it seems to me that on the face of it, the marshmallow in the top of the second structure is already at a lower level than the marshmallow would be if it was put on the top of the first structure. So I think it's interesting that people have voted more for number 2 this time round. But let's move on and see what happens next. So team number 1 have increased the size of their structure. And let's just do one more poll. Bear with me. So could you vote again, please? Which is going to be the structure with the marshmallow on the top that will be tallest? Okay, well, we seem to have gone back to thinking that number one is more likely to be successful. And let's move on a little bit further. So team number two have now created now this is interesting. Jalalov says it's going to fail or fall maybe. So team number two have built another little structure next to theirs. And then they've lifted up the first bit and put it on top of the second bit. It's still shorter though than the first one. Let's have one more vote. Bear with me a second. Oh, sorry, I realise I'm still running that poll, I think. Okay, so if you could vote again, which is more likely to succeed now? Okay, so we seem to have gone radically in the opposite direction now. And let's see what's going to happen. So now the marshmallow has been put on top of the very tall structure. And what's going to happen? So whoever it was who said that the structure number one was going to fall was absolutely right. And so you can see that the outcome in this particular case is that team number two have actually succeeded in creating a higher structure. And I wanted to link this back to the poll that we did right at the beginning there, and to maybe try to say what happens when you take different kinds of approaches to building the structure. So business students tend to be quite competitive. Maybe they have the theory that they think they would understand how to solve a problem, and they start constructing their tower and maybe don't realize until the very end, when they built it very high, that the marshmallow is heavier than they expect, and it causes the structure to fall over. Whereas with younger children, there's much more of a sense that people start to play and experiment repeatedly and over again, which tends to result in a more successful outcome. So I think this is an interesting lesson really, and I think what we tend to say when we run this exercise in our ideation workshops is that the marshmallow represents an assumption that you might have when you start to create a business. It may be an assumption about what your customers think and what your customers want. And what we try to draw attention to in running this exercise is that actually you can't rely on your assumptions, and that testing early and often is likely to lead to a more successful final outcome. Now, I just wanted to say that I think, and sorry, this is a slide with rather small writing, so apologies, but I think it's really important that as people who are starting to lead new businesses, that you have the ability to run those kinds of exercises in order to help form and build your teams. So I think we've kind of given the game away. We've shown you the answer and actually not given you the chance to do the exercise yourself, but hopefully we've given you an idea of something that you might want to try with your own teams. But I think it's also important to think that sometimes these kinds of exercises, they don't have all the answers. And actually, Jamie Thompson and Gemma Nightingale have written quite an interesting critique of the Marshmallow Challenge, and suggested that some of the things that are claimed for it, that it lets you learn about collaboration, lets you understand the dangers of consumption, and emphasize the importance of prototyping again and again, and also highlights that diversity in teams matter, but actually, sometimes it doesn't do all of those things because it is a little bit of a closed exercise that has a kind of particular likely outcome, and it kind of sets the participants up to fail. And actually, they suggest that you could improve the exercise by making it a bit more open-ended. And I thought I'd just illustrate that point by showing you something about another ideation exercise, which is from a great British academic, David Gauntlet, who uses the play tool Lego to create identities, or to explore questions about identities and characteristics of different team members. And actually, this is one I think he did of himself. So you can see that he's built a structure that tries to visually represent how or what kind of a person he is, how he feels about boundaries, how he fears to try things, but sometimes the fear can act as a motivational force, how he's someone with enormous energy and wants to communicate, and also how he likes to be creative. So I think that there are, if you look into things, and actually if you look back at our session 1, you'll find that we gave you lots of ideas for running team building events, or sorry, team building activities. And also we suggested the kinds of activities that you might be able to do virtually, even if your team members are distributed across quite a distance. Okay, so I'm now going to hand over to Simon and Sandra.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to pick up from where we left from the first 2 sessions. So for the people that have not had a chance to join us for the first 2 sessions, as Chris mentioned at the very beginning, you will have the recording available in the course content. So please go back and have a look at those sessions, because we're building upon the steps we took in the previous sessions in this session today. So basically, the exercises that we went through in session 1 and 2 left us with having identified a problem that we assessed, and we decided it fits with our ambitions, and it's got a good opportunity, and it fits with our skills or with our team skills. So we're happy with that problem. We have identified the customer segment that experiences this problem, and we've packaged it all together nicely in our big idea. However, everything we've done, even though it's based on statistics and desk market research, it's still not really, well, we don't know if it's true. So all of the things that we have actually identified so far are just assumptions. So what does that mean? Is that we've got these ideas in our head and we think that these things are true, but actually we don't really know for sure. And what we want to be doing is to validate these assumptions and make sure that they are actually facts and not just things that we think might be true. And going back to one of our first sessions again, we spoke about why startups fail. And we found out that 90% of the startups fail because no one wanted their product. So this means that they either did not identify the problem correctly, the problem was not big enough, or they did not build the right product. So all of these things, as said before, are just assumptions, and we need to make sure that we validate them and that we are, well, maybe not 100% sure, because we can probably never be, but as sure as possible that the things we assume are actually true. This is a good little comic scene for you to see that actually illustrates exactly what we're going to talk in this session. So I'm going to give you a little time to just have a look at it. All right, and with this great little comic, I'm going to pass it over to Simon to talk about how we can actually talk to customers, what we need to find out, and what the best way to do it is.
Good morning, everyone. Now, the first thing I want to say is that I really love this topic. And when I get really excited about something, I can start to speak very quickly. And so if I do go too quickly for anyone, then please raise your hand and tell me to slow down. First, I just want to talk about this picture really quickly. And there's a great saying in the world of startups is that there are no facts inside the building. And so at this very early stage of our startup journey, one of the things that we need to start doing is to start getting out of the building, as we say. And now that may be slightly more challenging in this post-coronavirus world, but what it means is that we need to get out and start engaging with customers in the real world to really test and understand if our idea can work. So one of the cheapest and easiest things we can do to start challenging some of the assumptions that we're making about our idea and start validating them is by talking to customers. And this is an absolutely vital skill that all entrepreneurs need to start developing. And I want to really stress that this approach of actually going and having effective conversations with customers is a skill. When you first do it, it's going to feel very unnatural, and and the ability to have a successful and effective conversation is something that you will get better at with time and practice. And so you need to be prepared to develop this as one of the skills that you have available to yourself as an entrepreneur. So when we're going out to talk to customers, the first things we want to start trying to understand are the assumptions that we're making about our business and our business model, the things that go around our product and service, and most importantly, are we solving a genuine problem for customers? So we've already mentioned this book, and I just want to talk about it again because it is so valuable. This book is £10 on Amazon, but we have been given the approval to provide free copies of it to students that take part in our various programs, including this program that we're delivering with the British Council. And so if there's one piece of advice that you take away from this session, it's spend some time reading this book. It's a very short read, and it's absolutely invaluable, packed full of good advice for how to have effective conversations with customers. And that tagline there, success starts with understanding your customers, is absolutely nails what we're getting at here. We need to understand what's in our customers' minds if we expect to be able to develop a product or service that we're going to be interested in, that we can build a successful business around. So when we're talking about talking to customers, it's exactly what it says on the tin. We want to go out and find our potential customers, and we want to start talking to them. Now, we don't want to talk to them about anything. What we're trying to understand here is to start digging into the various assumptions that we're making about our business. So, for example, starting with the problem that we're solving for them. So some of those things here. So in order to have good conversations with customers, it means being a detective and looking for clues. So what we mean by that is we're not going into these conversations with a specific answer in mind. We're actively listening to what our customers are telling us. The reason we're doing that is that it may be that the solution we have in mind, the product and service, mightn't be the best solution. It may be that there's a more painful customer problem that we can solve. So that's part of learning what customers want and letting go of your solution for now. Now that can be a really hard thing because the solutions that we've developed, the product or service that we have in mind, is probably what's motivating us at the moment. But in order to have these effective conversations with customers, we need to park that solution for now and go in with an open mind and to really try and understand the nature of the problem that we think our customer has. The third thing there is that it's really challenging to go and have conversations with complete strangers. Some people love that kind of stuff. I'm probably not one of them, and anybody who's closer to the sort of introvert level of the scale is going to find this pretty challenging as well. So take a partner, take someone for support. What this doesn't mean is talking to friends and family. And the reason we say that is because friends and family don't want to hurt our feelings. When we ask them for impartial advice and to be really honest, they're not going to give it to us because they love us. And so we really want to make sure we're talking to our potential customers and people who don't know us. The second thing is we aren't pitching our idea. It's really important at this stage that we don't pollute our customer conversations and the insights we can get from those by talking about our solution yet. Because if we give people, if we sort of go into pitching mode or sort of describing our product to them, then we're suggesting the kind of responses that we want from them, which we absolutely don't want. So how do we do it? So in order to have a successful customer conversation, you need to go knowing what you want to get out of it. And that means preparing questions in advance. What kind of questions do you need to ask? Well, the piece of advice that we always give to early stage entrepreneurs is to start with the riskiest assumptions. And we call these idea killers. So idea killers are the things that if they weren't true, would cause our business to fail. Now, as Sandra has already mentioned, most businesses fail because they are building a product or a service that addresses a problem that customers don't have, or it's not painful enough for them. So on that basis, the first thing we always start with is validating the problem, understanding the true nature of the problem, exactly what the problem is, how painful it is for customers, if they're trying to solve the problem at the moment using other means, and what they're currently spending on alternative underperforming for solutions. The second thing, and this is really, really important, is that we're not asking customers when we're talking to them to imagine how they would behave in the future, which humans are very bad at doing. What we want to get them to do is to reflect on past experiences. For example, tell me about the last time that you bought something online. And we want to get them talking about what they did, because what humans do is very different to what they think they'll do. The third thing, which is really important, is that what we want is insights from customers. We want to get them talking. And so for that reason, we need to ask what we call open-ended questions. So that means it's a type of question that can't be answered with a yes or a no. Open-ended questions typically start with the words what, why, how, when, which are going to encourage our customer to talk and tell us more. So, some tips for going out to have effective conversations with customers. First one, be prepared. Know what you want to get out of the interview and prepare a script of questions in advance. Now, in the back of the Talking to Humans book, there are some prompts on how to prepare a really effective customer interview script, and I'd encourage you to take a look at that. Secondly, select who you be really clear on who you want to speak to. Make sure these people are your potential customers. What we don't want to do is choose people who aren't our potential customers and then get potentially misleading insights and feedback from them. Third thing, speak to one person at a time. So this is something you should be taking your time with. You want to be in ideally a comfortable place where people aren't rushed, so you can take some time exploring the interview with them. Number 4, so have an open mind. Be ready to hear things you don't want to hear. The worst thing you can do here is to go in with your solution in mind and then continually be listening for things that validate your specific solution. Be open to other possibilities. Number 5, get them talking about past behavior. We've already mentioned that. Number 6, listen. So this is a really important one, because you don't just want to take the answers they give you on face value. You want to dig into their responses and understand further. You can only do that when you're actively listening. So that's why it's going to be easiest to do these sessions when you take someone with you. Someone can take notes or record the session on their phone. The other person can listen to responses and then guide the questions. That brings me on to point number 7, which is drill into responses when they sound interesting. Now, a great example here is what we call the 5 whys. So if someone says, look, I really don't like shopping online. If you ask them, say, tell me about the last thing you bought online, someone says, I don't like shopping online. That's not the end of that question. Just be like that curious 2-year-old that's always asking why. So why? It's like, well, and you never know what's going to keep digging to the responses they give you to understand the root cause of their frustration. And lastly, once we've conducted a number of interviews, look for themes and commonality amongst the various responses. And they're the insights we're going to draw. Now, once we've done testing, and talking to customers is the quickest, cheapest, easiest thing that we can start to start validating our idea and our business. But what people tell us and what they do can often be very different things. And it's not that customers are intending to lie to us, it's just that people are very bad at imagining how they'll respond in a certain situation until they're presented with it. So that's why we're talking about testing versus interviewing. The difference between testing and interviewing is talking to a customer and asking them to reflect on past experiences. Conducting tests to develop insights or experiments is where we get potential customers to perform an action. Because what people do will give us much deeper insights compared to what people tell us they will do. So what I want to spend now is a bit of time giving you a bit more information on about how you conduct basic market tests or experiments on your potential customers to develop deeper insights into your idea. Now, we've given you a second book here. Again, this book would cost you about £10 on Amazon if you decided to buy it. Again, we're giving you a PDF version of the copy to use for free. once you've read the Talking to Humans book and developed those skills and spoken to customers, then you can move on to testing with humans. So how to conduct experiments to make better decisions about your business. So as far as the things that we can, as far as the types of things that we can test, there are initially at this early stage, two very broad areas that we can test. The first one is how interesting and relevant our product or service is to potential customers. And the second one is how willing are potential customers to pay for our product or service, and how much might they pay, both of which are really important things determining the ultimate viability of an idea. So there are a few different ways we can test whether our idea is interesting to a potential customer. Some of these are by using a landing page, which is a very simple one-page website where we can send traffic to customers and test their reaction or their response to it. The second one is by conducting advertising. This is normally done online. We could use Google ads, Instagram ads, Facebook ads, again, and test customers' reaction to these. With other promotional materials such as flyers, ignore pre-selling, paper testing is where we make mock-ups of a particular product or service and put it in front of customers to test, as is with a product prototype. Now, to show you in a bit more detail what I mean, I'm going to give you two examples of people testing interest in their ideas by using some of these methods. The first example is something called anger rooms. And this was an idea that was entered in our own university Big Idea Challenge 3 years ago. Now, what an anger room is, it's a room in which you can pay to go and destroy physical objects using a weapon of your choice in a fit of rage. Think crockery, furniture, old televisions, whatever you like. It's a way of kind of letting off steam. Now, obviously, traditionally, the way people would have normally tested an idea like this would be to actually build the anger room and then to see if customers wanted to come and do it. The problem we have with that approach is that by the time we've already invested the time, money, and energy in building the anger room, if we then realize that customers aren't interested, we've already wasted that time, money, and energy, and we can't get it back. So instead, we worked with this participant to develop a simple flyer. Now, at this stage, the anger room didn't exist. It was pure concept. We made the flyer that you can see on the screen right now. And you can see there we have an incentive, early bird offer, 2-for-1 tickets, and a call to action. So a call to action, we tell the customer, this is the action you have to take in order to demonstrate your interest in this thing. So we asked them to send an email to contact.angerrooms@gmail.com. So what we did was that we made 200 of these flyers, and then the individual went down to Liverpool Street Station, a very busy train station with a lot of stressed out people that work in the City of London. She handed out the flyers, and she received 25 emails that evening from potential customers saying, I want to do this. And so by using that very, very deep and easy test, we were able to get some initial validation of customer interest in the anger room. Now, the second example is something called a landing page experiment. In fact, this is something that I did myself a few weeks ago. For a number of years, I've sold eggs at Accelerated just to my friends and colleagues because I like to eat fresh eggs myself. When the coronavirus lockdown came to the UK and our building was shut down, I thought, well, maybe there are people in my local community that might also be interested in eggs. And so I created this very simple landing page with something called the Dalston Egg Shop. Fantastically fresh, free-range eggs for collection and local delivery. And the call to action, if people want to deliver delicious eggs, they could get free delivery by leaving their name and email. And so when we ask people to part with personal information, that's something that people are unwilling to do unless they consider what they're receiving in return has some value. So the outcome of this was that the first thing, the landing page I built with something called a website called card.co, a really, really great resource that you can use for free to build your own landing page. The second thing is I grabbed a royalty-free image from unsplash.com. You know, there are thousands and thousands of high-quality images on this website that you can use on your own landing page. And this landing page literally took me about 15 minutes. I then posted the link to the landing page in some Facebook groups that were relevant to the people that lived in my area. And then in the space of 48 hours, I had 100 people sign up telling me that they wanted to buy eggs. And I've since converted about 15 of those people into paying customers. So the second thing that we can test, and the first thing we were testing there was interest and relevance. The second area that we're really interested in is the willingness and ability of people to pay. So there are a number of ways that we can do this as well before we actually build the product or the service. These can be as simple as what we call a button to nowhere. So you can build a website for your product or service and put something simple like a buy now button on there. You might not even link that button to a page, but you record the number of clicks that that button gets. So these are customers that are showing us they're interested. And again, so at this stage, we're interested in the quickest and cheapest ways that we can develop maximum insight into our business. And so once we can see we've got some validation for the buy now button, we might then do something more sophisticated by actually building a product page and having a checkout process. That brings me on to point 2, which relates to fake sales. And so this is selling a product or a service that doesn't actually exist yet. Now, obviously, you need to be very careful with this kind of validation because there is the potential for negative fallout or reaction when the customer realizes that the product or service they bought doesn't exist yet. And so obviously you need to manage that process. A great way to do this is normally to advise the product is sold out, or to say that, be very upfront and say that, you know, this process has been part of a validation experiment. The business is at a very early stage, but as soon as the product launches, we'll give you a discount on the product. The third point is pre-sales. So many of you will have heard of crowdfunding before. Kickstarter is a very popular platform for that. Pre-selling a product before it exists is a great way to validate interest. And then the final 2 points there are the minimum viable product. So what we mean there is, rather than building the fully featured version of your product or service, what's the smallest version of it that we could build to actually test interest? Going back to the Egg Club example, I might not have access to those incredible free-range eggs yet, but I could try and sell some to customers. If I have people, if I'm able to convert some of those customers that registered their interest, I can simply go and buy some incredible eggs at a shop and deliver them in my own packaging. And so I can test the customer's interest without needing to have the supplier and the stock on hand. Okay, moving right along. The testing cycle, and I think this is the last thing I want to say about testing, is that this is something that you're continually with every aspect of your business. On day one, your business is completely full of unknowns. And so our job as entrepreneurs is to try and turn those unknowns into knowns by conducting experiments. The cycle we use to do that is to go through this loop called plan, test, learn, repeat. In the plan stage, we identify the riskiest assumption. So, you know, what is the riskiest assumption our business faces at the moment, and how can we test that? So once we understand the problem and we've developed a solution that we think addresses that problem, we want to start testing that solution with customers. Again, you'd go back to those pointers I gave you on testing interest and relevance, a landing page experiment, a flyer. We then carry out the test by driving traffic to the landing page, by posting it around in forums, or by handing out flyers, or whatever your test might be. What we do then is that we sort of through the results of the test. What did we learn? What were the results of it? Did people sign up or didn't they? If they didn't, we've got a problem with our solution. Maybe, or it could be with our customer or our channel. So you need to be able to kind of distill that and work out, well, what do we think the problem is? And then finally, once we've gleaned those insights, we then consider that in the context of our business, and we design the new test, and we go through the cycle again. And so our mantra at this stage is, what's the quickest and cheapest way we can get learnings into this business, or get insights into our business idea? And on that note, I'm going to pass back to, lastly, again, testing with humans. There's an incredible amount of detail in there on how to conduct successful experiments with customers. I encourage you to read it. And on that note, I'm going to pass back to Sandra.
Thank you very much, Simon. That was extremely useful. A lot of information, but very, very, very useful tips on how to speak to our customers and basically get information out of them that we need as a business. I think it's also quite important that, well, at the heart of all this testing is the fact that as a business, we exist for our customers. So we need to really know what they want and what they need. It's not the other way around, that customers exist for us as a business. So these books are available in the course content, and you can download them and read them in your own time, and please do so. Talking about our next session now next week, we're going to talk about pitching. So next week is going to be maybe a little bit more focused on our competition, the Creative Spark Big Idea Challenge. We will go through the different steps that you should take to build a very good pitch, show you some examples of good pitches and what the strengths are of those really good pitches, and also talk about how you can record your pitch while you are in isolation, because we know that if you're a team, you're probably in different houses, staying with your families, and therefore you cannot meet and record the pitch together. So we will give you more details next week about how you can do that and what we expect you to do for the competition. All right, and now we are just about 45 minutes in. If anyone has any question, please feel free to pop it in the chat window now, and we'll stay on for a couple of more minutes to answer some questions.
Okay, so there's a question from Sophia, I think, Sandra. So Sophia says she has a question for Simon, and it says, an event where I'm involved, a medieval festival with many interactive things which need registration at the beginning of September. How long before the project can I start the advertisement? What's the better way to promote it?
Hi, I would start promoting it in some way as early as possible, because I guess looking at, without knowing much about the idea, but looking at this, I would say, one of the biggest risks with events are that you don't get enough people along, or you don't sell enough tickets for the event to be viable. And so I would start testing interest as soon as possible. Even if you're not taking money for ticket sales, I'd be sort of putting up information on the website describing the value or why the event is interesting, and asking people to pre-register interest now. So so they're the first to know about an early bird ticket special or something like that. So you're trying to test customer interest, even if you're not taking their money at this stage.
And Simon, I was thinking it was interesting that you were telling us that you've created a business that responds specifically to the current circumstances that we find ourselves in, and you were adapting something that you're already doing because there needed to be a delivery element to your egg business. And I'm thinking, Sophia, I'm sure that you're already thinking about this, that if you've got a festival that you're planning for September, what is the impact of COVID-19 going to be on that, and are there ways that you could mitigate in relation to any adjustments that you might need to make?
Yep.
Okay, we've got one more from Tigran asking, can you please tell some questions which we can reform and ask to our potential customers? I mean, examples. Tigran, I'm going to direct you back to the Talking to Humans book. If you have a look in the book, there's lots of examples of questions and how to create your own questions that are specific to the things that you want to test and validate with your customers. So have a look in the book and you'll find plenty of examples in there.
I mean, a really key general point there is to ask open questions. So rather than a question that leads to an answer that is either yes or no, to ask the question in such a way that the person being asked has to come up with some content to answer the question themselves. How do you feel about something, or what do you think about something, rather than do you prefer A or B?
Can I add something final to this as well, Tigran?
Go ahead, Simon.
Tigran, I'd say, if you're at a very early stage, I guess the thing we must validate is that there's a genuine customer problem here. And so I would say, look at the solution that you've developed, flip that around and say, well, if this is a solution, what must that mean that the problem is? And then I would start exploring that area in detail with the customer. And so, if your solution addresses, frustrations or concerns that people might have with buying things online, for example, then I'd say after a couple of warm-up questions with the potential customer. So the first thing you want to do is sort of filter the customer. So ask them some demographic questions. How old are you? What's your profession? That kind of stuff, to make sure you're talking to the right person. Then I'd say start steering them around to the topic. Tell me about the last time that you bought something online. How did that experience go? What was the most frustrating thing about that experience? So you want to get them really talking about that experience. And so ask a series of questions. So if it was so frustrating, what did you do to try and solve the problem? Did that cost you anything? How much did you spend doing that? So you're looking to unpack that frustration and to really understand it. So if there's only one area you start talking about, start with the problem.
And I'm just seeing that Sophia has responded to the point about the impact of the pandemic on her project. And, I do think that so many people are going to be thinking about creative, innovative methods that they can use to replace events in which people would come together in close proximity. So, would there be a way of doing what you want to do and maintaining social distancing? Or could there be something that you could do that would be delivered online? Or could you potentially delay the timing? These are the kinds of things to think about. Tigran's saying, can we do the validation using surveys, or does it have to be, I think you're saying, really a face-to-face interview? Do you want to come back on that one, Simon?
Yeah, no, look, absolutely, it has to be face-to-face. Surveys are very closed, and it denies you, the value in talking to customers is the possibility that you can start getting insights into something you didn't even think. B, human interaction and expression and tone of voice is so important when people are coming back to you. When you do a survey, you can really only kind of ask questions about things you know, or design questions to explore things you know. The third thing is that response rates to surveys are very, very poor. And so I'd say, and the only people who are likely to do it are people that feel sorry for you, friends, family, and that kind of stuff, who are not the people you want to talk to. So I'd say initially, absolutely, you cannot use surveys.
And if there's a problem with talking to people actually face-to-face in the current circumstances, Simon, using the telephone?
Yeah, telephone, I'd say video chat is a preferred option. And I think at the moment, a lot of people are at home and have a bit more time on their hands than they might normally. And so I think at the moment, it's a really interesting time and potentially more or easier time to be doing this kind of customer validation. But failing a video chat, absolutely the telephone.
So, Sandra, sorry, over to you.
Okay, well, I was going to wrap it up, unless you've got anything that you would like to add, Chris, for this session.
Well, I think it's just reminding people that if they'd like to carry on the conversation, the great way to do that is in our discussion forum, which is on the course site. And just reminding people that the recording of today's session should be up online within about an hour. Yeah.
Exactly. And in the same section, basically in the course content under session 3 is where you will find the PDF of the 2 books, Talking to Humans and Testing to Humans. So you can download them and read them in your own time. And we shall see you next week talking about pitching and how to create an amazing pitch for your idea.
And just to say as well, Sandra, that just as it's been fantastic to have Simon today as our kind of guest lecturer. Next week we've got Natasha Triai, who is going to be joining us, I think,
Yes.
part of the video pitch preparation. So thanks everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.